So we are inside this amazing little space, which has been built just over the last few days. So it's wood and plywood. The first coat of white paint is going on it today. We've got a ladder. We're surrounded by screws and nails and drills. What else do we have in here?
Steps, ladders.
You've got a jumper to keep you warm in case it gets chilly.
Yeah, that's it really. It's like a little, well, it's like a little sanctuary really, isn't it?
It is like a little sanctuary,
Yeah.
which is amazing because...
And these make it all the more, I don't know what you can say, because I was thinking yesterday about this church. You walk in here and you feel the serenity straight away, I think.
Say again, you feel...
Serenity, like you feel like...
Serenity,
Yeah.
yeah, I see.
You sit there and then you read these and you think, wow, this church has been standing for so long. I know it was bombed in the Second World War, but the core of the church still stands. And these things, like 1777, for God's sake.
It's a long time, right?
A long, long time.
So these 5 memorials, they are part of the South Wall and they're part of the South Door Project. So these are going to move quite soon, just in the next few days. And their arrangement together is really interesting. And they're all different shapes and sizes, and they all talk about different lives in different ways. You were sharing with me earlier that you've read them, and that in this little sanctuary space, you have a specific job to do, but you're also coming into contact with each of these lives and what little we can learn from them, from the memorials. And I wonder, just briefly, if we can go through them one by one. Okay. So at the top here, we have an Honorable Colonel William McGilvray, who was born in 1764 and he died in 1825. This memorial looks much more modern than many of the others. And that's because, as it explains, his grave and that of his wife, Magdalene, were destroyed by bombs in World War II. This church was bombed in October 1940. And so this was a project just a couple of decades ago where choices were made by St. James's about which new memorials would be made in order to bring these lives and these histories back into the fabric of the church, as it were. And now this is about to move and go elsewhere. So what can we learn about him from this, and what do you think of it?
Well, he must have been an amazing man, because Fort William's named after him in Canada.
Yeah.
You know, it's he must have done some great work in Canada to have a place named after him for a start.
He has lots of places named after him. I'm Canadian, and the surname McGilvray, I think, oh my gosh, it's schools and streets, all sorts. And so when I first started in my role at St. James's a couple of years ago, and we're in this side chapel normally for prayer every day, and often I will look at this memorial and I think, oh my goodness, he gave his name to many different parts of Canada, from Lake Superior, which is in Ontario now, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And I think it's interesting, these words like perseverance and extended, and that's because he was a businessman. Yeah. Chief Director of the Northwest Company. This is a rich man. And he goes to colonial Canada with his Scottish accent, and then ultimately he comes back having done all of this work with tons and tons and tons of people. He dies probably in this part of wealthy London, and then was buried here. So he has this big, long journey. And it's also a little encapsulation of colonialism. Yeah. So what kinds of relationships were there between different inhabitants of Canada, his expectations of them, the relationship with First Nations people? It makes me curious about the detail of this. Yeah. And that Canada, as a place, it doesn't get founded until 1867, which is way after he died. Yeah. So in a way, we learn a lot. These are like teeny tiny Wikipedia entries. And in another way, they're like asking so many questions.
What made him decide to go to Canada?
Yeah.
When as you say, Canada wasn't, would you say?
It didn't exist yet as a nation.
Exactly. So what made him think, I want to go there?
Yeah, there was money to be made for sure.
It must have been, yeah. And to take his wife with him as well. His wife must have been very, compliant, very willing to go with him, or she'd done it reluctantly. You don't know. She might have hated every minute of it.
She might have hated every minute of it. Yeah, we don't know. That's true. And in the decision making about which memorials would come back, which names and stories would come back after the bombing, it's his grave, his name, his achievements. and that of his wife Magdalene. And it makes me think, we don't even know from this when she was born and when she died.
No.
Like, who is this woman?
No.
And you're right, we don't know what the conversations would have been between the two of them. I can easily imagine, as perhaps you can too, him saying, all right, Magdalene, off we go. Money to be made in Canada.
Yeah.
Or perhaps she stayed here and he did what, many people did, where he went back and forth. Maybe he was there for a while and then came back. Who knows? Did they have children? What happened?
We don't know. No.
What happened? So this super, super interesting.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next level. This is one of the saddest memorials, I think, that we have inside St. James's. So would you like to read it out? I think that could be quite a powerful thing to do.
Underneath are deposited the remains of Margaret, the beloved wife of Michael Yates, Esquire. Love, peace, goodness, faith, hope, charity, humility, sincerity and gentleness. Such is the sorrowing but faithful tribute of an afflicted husband to the memory of a departed excellence on the 17th of August 1816, and in the 24th year of her age. She left this world to enjoy that peace which passeth all understanding. Also their infant son, Robert Burton Yates, who died February the 19th, 1817, aged 10 months. For such is the kingdom of heaven. That is a very sad one, because to have that pain of his wife dying, and then 10 months later his son dies, it's probably the only thing he had left to remember her by or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he died as well.
And I wonder how often he visited this place, visited their resting places.
Yeah, how many times did he come here? Probably a lot.
Yeah.
Must have done. I would have done.
So there is Michael remembering his wife, Margaret. We don't have Michael's dates, but clearly he outlived probably for many years. He outlived them both. Mm-hmm. And it's their son's surname as well as his middle name. So it's Robert Burton Yates. And that makes me think of what happens when you baptize a child, where you say their full name.
Yeah.
I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Robert Burton Yates. But at the top, Margaret, that's intimate, right?
Yeah,
that's like first name.
Very much so.
And they're the same size, Margaret and her son Robert. Yeah. And earlier, when we were speaking about this, you pointed out that she died on the 17th of August, and then he died the next year in February.
Yeah.
And if you kind of do the math, evidently she died in labor, which so many women did, which tragically around the world, many women still do.
Yeah.
And I wonder what that must have been like for that tiny, tiny baby to emerge out into the world and to be held by his father and perhaps members of the family, medical professionals, maybe midwives, and to be held by someone who was grieving so deeply.
Yeah, to be held in grief rather than happiness. It's a different feeling, because children do pick up on emotions and feelings, don't they?
Yeah.
Like pets do.
Yeah.
As well.
So
So
the deep empathy, the dependence.
Yeah. He must have sensed. Obviously, he knew it was loved, but it was a sorrowful, sad occasion for them, rather than a joyous one, which a baby usually brings.
Yeah. And she was only 24.
I know, she's only 24, yeah, that's no age at all.
There are two quotations in this memorial as well. One is, that peace which passeth all understanding. And what a shocking use of the word enjoy. She left this world to enjoy that peace which passeth all understanding. So a kind of a shocking and a painful anguish death. And also that hope that's taken from prayers in the Church of England tradition, that we offer one another, that we pray and we bless one another with God's own peace, which passeth all understanding. And a death like that surely also passeth all human understanding, the shock of why has that happened, where has she gone? And then the next bit of the story, chronologically, also comes with a quotation, for such is the kingdom of heaven. And that's also, to me, wildly painful. It suggests a kind of trust in the hope of the resurrection, but almost this terrible way of thinking about death and loss, which sometimes many Christians have carried with them, which is, you know, the idea of the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Yeah. And the next phrase in that biblically is, blessed be the name of the Lord. How do we sit with that when terrible things happen? And
well, that's the age-old question that people say, if there was a God, he wouldn't let things happen like this.
Yeah.
But I don't know, what do you say? Well, how can you explain that? How can you know, you can't, the Bible literally can't be taken literally, can it? Okay.
No.
Of course it can't.
No.
But some people do take it literally.
They do, and
Some
this bears witness to people's suffering in a way which you're right, it's beyond understanding. And I wonder how many people have done what we're doing now, where you really reflect on this story and link it to this idea of the perpetual pain and despair of the world, especially in the grief and loss, where these things should not happen in a world that's filled with love and hope. And yet our world is filled with love and hope. For people of faith, there somehow is the persistence of a possibility of a loving God. And for many people, they would very understandably encounter a shock of death, of suffering, and think, how can I possibly, with any sense of hope or processing anything that's happened to me, also say, yes, blessed be the name of the Lord. Yeah. We trust in God. For some, it deepens their trust. For others, it's too horrifying. It's unbearable. And so I wonder about Michael's sense of faith and what happened there when this memorial took place. We'll never know. We'll never know.
I think you must have a very deep faith, because to say to enjoy that passive, because he must have thought you into a better place.
Yeah.
He must have thought you into a better place, because he wouldn't have put enjoy, would he?
No, that's true. And it's an enjoyment that maybe he hopes he can share in.
Exactly.
That when he dies, there will be some unity of love and peace. Exactly. And it makes me curious about what she enjoyed on this side of heaven, the idea of the pleasure of enjoyment, where maybe he's thinking to himself, oh, I remember what she really enjoyed when she was 21, when she was 23. It's a wild, wild memorial. And in terms of its look, its aesthetic, it's really simple. Yeah. It's just a rectangle in the wall. Yep. There's actually not a great deal of variation or even skill in the lettering.
No.
It would have been fairly affordable.
There's no flamboyance about it. Is there?
Oh, no flamboyance. What a perfect way of putting it. Yeah, I agree.
It's just as straightforward, well, from the art, I suppose.
Yeah, straightforward sadness. It tells a story.
Yep.
The middle is really different. The SS at the top probably is referring to this idea of the sacredness of God. So it's a little abbreviation. So if we sort of follow that through, it's the idea of sacred to the memory of the Reverend. So we have a priest.
Yeah, I thought it was meant he was on a ship.
Oh yeah, like the SS, HMS. Yeah. No, I see what you mean. But yeah, so sacred to the memory of the Reverend Edward Trotter, LLD, so he's a very educated man, prebend of the Cathedral Church of Down in the Kingdom of Ireland. So he's a Church of Ireland person. That's a very interesting thing to think about, not only in our own time and in the early in the early part of the 20th century, around the Troubles, much later, but also in the 18th century. You know, who was this guy and what was he like? And this is a much fancier memorial, carved in a very different way, who died in this parish of a lingering disorder.
I always wondered what that was, a lingering disorder.
What a mystery. What a mystery. Like, what is that?
It's a long illness, obviously, isn't it? But
yeah,
but things, they didn't know what cancer was in them days. They didn't know what anything was in them days, really, did they? They didn't have a... because in Regent Street...
in where, sorry?
Regent Street.
Yeah.
Do you know the Captain Bligh, who was on the Mutiny on the Bounty?
Yeah.
He collapsed and died in that street.
Oh.
But he died of cancer. But he never knew he had cancer.
Oh my gosh. Yes,
so the pain he must have suffered before he collapsed and died in that Regent Street was amazing, really, when you think of it.
Because, I mean, people just didn't know. He may not have been aware of what he had, but clearly, as you say, so it's like, it's chronic, and it affected him to the extent that that was the cause of his death. 8th day of July, 1777, he was 48 years old. And then this is weird too. So then the script underneath, it gets very flowing. It's kind of like handwriting in stone. His death was untimely to the world. for his life was one scene of virtue and goodness. And scene, it's like theater performance. So SC. And there's this weird thing going on with this, isn't there? His death was untimely. And then the phrase "to the world" isn't filled in. It isn't filled in with this dark black color like the rest of it. And so what it seems to read from far away is his death was untimely, for his life was one scene of virtue and goodness. And I'm perplexed by that. What do you think?
I don't know. I think, was it added later?
It could have been added later, maybe.
It might have been added later because I don't know.
I wonder about whether or not it would have been not centered then, but it's off no matter what you do. So it could have been added later. This is such a puzzle. What a mystery.
Yeah. One which we'll never solve, probably.
Probably. Oh, wow. And at the end of that extra, if we want to sort of guess that way, that extra phrase "to the world," there's a full stop. So it would change this from one sentence into two. Yeah. His death was untimely to the world, for his life was one scene of virtue and goodness. And look at that G in goodness. Now, as someone, I mean, you work with your hands, you build stuff, you make stuff. The relationship between, say, like the beautiful and the practical is close for you in a way that it isn't for me. And so can you imagine, say, like that ampersand, like how long does it take? How much skill do you need to have just to have a steady hand?
Very skilled hand, isn't it? When you think that one mistake and that's all ruined. He gets to this piece here and he does this G and makes one mistake, all this is gone.
Yeah.
He has to redo it all over again.
Yeah.
And it's probably cost a lot of money in them days to get these sort of things done.
For sure. And this has been done by someone who really knows what they're doing. And so that's more expensive as well, right? This is built to last.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so
built
interesting.
To impress, I think, as well. Like, it's like flowing, all these G's and the old-fashioned S.
Oh, yeah. And the old-fashioned A and T together.
Sometimes they have the proper S, and other times they have the F. C looks like an F.
Oh, yeah, that's like the 18th century style S. And then look at this in Parish, where it looks like an F and it has this little... Someone's like had fun here, if I can put it like that. These are amazing details.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's amazing. So here's this guy who died and was probably ill for a long time before he died, and he was 48 years old. And then we've got the next one along to the memory of, what do you think? Is that Burnett?
Burnett Abercrombie, Esquire.
We have another F here, second son of George and Mary Abercrombie of Tillibody? How would you pronounce that?
Yeah, Tillibody. I've never heard of Tillibody in
Me
Scotland.
neither. In the county of Stirling, so he's Scottish, who departed this life March 24th, 1792, aged 54. So far, the very, very much so, one of the older people who's memorialized here, but still young by our standards. He's just middle-aged, he's younger than you. Wow. And we learn basically nothing about him except his relationship to his family. And so I wonder whether or not that's just a convention, or whether or not, I mean, maybe his parents outlived him. They could have done.
Mm-hmm.
And did he live here in London? Or, he's born in Stirling, and then what happens to him? We don't have any information about him at all, except his relationship to his family and his place of origin. So this is where he comes from. These are the people who gave birth to him and raised him. Who is he? Who is he?
Yeah, exactly. Who is he? Or did he die in London? Or was he in Scotland, as you said? You don't know, do you? It's just a very plain, not very much information, actually.
Yeah. And you were looking earlier in this memorial in the center to the Reverend Edward Trotter at S's and old style and new style. So our memorial in the center is from the 1770s. This one's from the 1790s. Completely different approach to letter cutting. Yeah. But there are some similarities in this too. So on the third line where it says second son of, it's almost exactly the same first letter in the way that it's been carved to the F in the word life in the penultimate line below. But I think the only way that we can discern, and of on that same line, the only way that we can discern that it's meant to be an S is that it has that little flick going in the opposite direction. Can you see that? So it's the same as
like
Parish.
Like a little penguin's wing.
Like a little penguin. You're right.
Yeah.
And these things, when we look at them and we see interesting images in letters, it's almost like you look at a cloud and you think, oh, that cloud looks like a bear. I think so. It's got, it's animated. It's got a life of its own.
And I wonder why they stopped doing that in English language.
That's a good question. I'd love to know about that. And it's the same in Esquire here, in the way that these little letters go together. If we just took those 4 letters and the abbreviation dot and maybe kind of like took them out of this memorial and expanded them and moved them around, it would be like a work of art.
Yeah.
And we still know in the 21st century that when we see what looks like capital E, F, Q, dot, R above, we read it as Esquire, but that's because we read back through history. Like, no one would do that now unless they were being incredibly pretentious.
Yeah, but maybe that was it.
Maybe.
That was pretentious was the thing. Everyone started calling them pretentious. They stopped doing it.
Maybe. No, I think that's really interesting. And we've got an Esquire over here going back to how Michael Yates is described. And there it's much bigger. It's E, S, Q. We can read that really clearly. And then with a little r and a dot. So here in the 1790s, a couple of generations earlier rather, we have the r and the dot, but it's really different. It looks very, very fancy, very flourishy. Yeah. And this one's also really simple. So in terms of simplicity, size, shape, it's very, very similar to this really tragic memorial from the early 19th century to Margaret and her son, Robert Burton Yates. But it seems to be telling a different story, and about someone who was 54. But now that I think about it, this memorial, because it's also about family connections, it's like, it is imagining, to me, I imagine him as a baby, held by George and Mary Abercrombie in this little place we've never heard of called Tilbody. Yeah. He's 54, but the memorial is like baby memorial almost.
Yeah, exactly. I'm wondering, I'll see this writing it out, because in them days, people read and write were of the minority. Most of the people, working people and the, whatever they call peasants, whatever they was called, couldn't read or write. It was only the scholars and all these well-to-do people that could read and write.
Yeah, education is for the few.
Yeah, exactly.
So
in them days it was,
Yeah, so taking that into account with all of these different memorials in this church and many, many, many different places, often they're associated with privilege and with access to certain kinds of resources, education and professional identity being among them. And you're an esquire, you're in the system, you're in the establishment, and having these texts, you're right. You're assuming that not only are these people able to read and then want text, they want letters. They're excited about the word in relation to memory, the tragedy of death, and being remembered. These things, some of the memorials we have here and elsewhere, you get a lot of pictures. You get a lot of sculpture that connects to, say, someone's shield of their aristocratic family, or even a large statue of someone as they looked. We've got loads of them around here. But all of these, even though they're quite different from each other, and the design is different too, the shape is different, just text. That's all we've got. Yeah. We've got one more, and it's in the shape of a tomb, which is very interesting. In memory of Anne Boscawen. And what does it say? Can you read it from there?
Daughter of the late General George and niece of the late Admiral Boscawen. She departed this life on the 14th of February 1831 in her 86th year. 54 years of her life were spent in the honoured service of the late Queen Charlotte. This tablet is erected by a grateful and affectionate friend who enjoyed in her society for 30 years, a love like that of a parent.
What do you think of this?
You've seen, I think, I don't know, a grateful friend, but she must have looked after her.
Yeah.
She must have, maybe, I don't know, financially maybe, or, was she ill and she looked after her? Did she take her in because she never had nowhere to live? A love like that of a parent. So, did she take pity on her and bring her up?
Yeah.
She's 86 as well, which is a very old age for 1831.
It's amazing. So just in this wall, we have a memorial to someone who died when they weren't even a year old yet.
Yeah.
and a memorial to someone who died when she was 86.
And in 1831, 86 must have been astounded by that.
Incredible. And so this monument it's sort of going back and forward through time, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know how long Anne, we do know how long Anne spent in the service of the late Queen Charlotte, 54 years. How old was she when she started that role?
Yeah,
we don't
exactly.
know.
How old was she when she finished it?
Exactly. And what we do know, if we do the math, is that the friend who is nameless here, I'm so curious, a grateful and affectionate friend, that the friend met her when Anne probably was in her 50s.
Yeah.
So let's say the friend meets her when Anne is around 55.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beginning of something really powerful, really sacred, like that of a parent, a sort of younger woman, older woman, really looking after. So Anne, as a younger woman, looks after, kind of, honored service, somehow, looks after Queen Charlotte, of all people.
Yeah.
And then later in her life, she almost, if you'll indulge me, becomes like a kind of Queen Charlotte figure where you think about sort of time moving back and forth and the closeness between these people.
Yeah.
For this anonymous, grateful, and affectionate friend.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
Wow. So it's like Anne's life for the friend began like a sort of third period of her life.
Yeah.
It began at around the time that Burnett Abercrombie over here died. He was 54.
Yeah.
It began after Edward Trotter died when he was 48.
Yeah.
We don't know when Michael Yates died,
No.
but his memorial and his great tragic, sort of pain and suffering for his wife and his son. His wife died when she was 24.
Yeah.
This is
It's amazing.
This is all of life on this wall.
Yeah.
And it's global and it's local and it's people who are, if I can put it this way, it's people who are pretty fancy.
Yeah.
They're,
Oh yeah. They must have had some sort of be financially well off because of this must have cost. It wouldn't be affordable to the normal run-of-the-mill, general public, would it?
absolutely not. And here too, in this place. And these memorials, the 4 of them on the bottom section of the south wall, they weren't destroyed during the war, so we have their original kind of look from the 18th and the 19th centuries. And then the one we started with above, that's what the decision was for a memorial made in the late 20th century. So the stone cutting is really, really different. It looks in its font a lot more like something that you could also see, say, typed on a computer.
Yeah.
It's varied, but it's also pretty consistent.
And it's in colour.
And it's in color, yeah. I really like the color contrast here. I like the blue a lot. I think it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
And what a funny thing that memorial up top is in color, and then these ones down below are in black and white.
Yeah.
Wow, it's incredible. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I know that you're hard at work today, and that I just came in on a whim and said, hey, do you want to talk about the memorials? And you very, very kindly said yes. I'd love to, by way of wrapping up so that you can get on with your day, would you like to say a little bit about, who you are, the work you do? Just for the sake of sharing your name, where you grew up.
My name's Jeff. I grew up in Canning Town, East London. I now live in Abridge in Essex. I've got 1 daughter, 3 granddaughters, and I work for Fuller's, who do restoration work on all sorts of churches all over London. And it's very interesting and enjoyable work because you don't know what you can do one day to the next. I was up a bell tower 3 weeks ago, and no one's been up there for 150 years.
You were the first person after 150 years to be in a bell tower.
I was the third person.
You were the third person to be in a bell tower after 150 years.
But the amazing thing is, you're still walking up the same stairs. That this is the oldest. It's St Bartholomew's the Great.
Oh yeah.
That one.
Yeah. Ancient.
Yeah, it's the oldest. It's supposed to be the oldest church in London.
Wow.
But I'm going up the bell tower and I'm thinking, how many people since this church is built has been coming up here, and what their lives are like, and I always think things like that. When I see worn out steps, how many people walked on these steps over 200, 300 years?
Yeah.
And it does amaze me, this sort of stuff, and I love every minute of it, really.
Wow. Every life is sacred,
Yeah.
Every life matters. These lives,
Of course it is.
No matter what we
Every
do or
life.
don't know about them, they all matter. The life of everyone who's been up into that bell tower for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And like the lives that we have now in London and around the world, every single one just matters. We're part of the echoes of history. And now you're part of that at St James's too.
Yeah, in 200 years, two other people might be standing here talking about exactly the same thing.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That would be a powerful thing. Their stories endure, and our stories do too.
So everyone's story endures because everyone, as you say, every life matters.
Yeah.
And everyone's important.
And
no one's better than anybody else.
No one's better than anybody else. Amen. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you have a good afternoon. I'm going to let you get back to work.
Thank you very much.
See you later.
See you later.